What would the Ethiopian people call a god?
They would call God the Great Spirit, the Great
Mhm.
Ether, the creator of the universe, because they created everything, including them, the ETs. Even though they're highly advanced ETs, they're also created by God. So we are all brothers and sisters. We are all the creations of the common creator. Even though the ETs from THIAOOUBA, they live on category 9 planet, and we live on category 1 planet, the lowest category. We all came from the same creator.
Welcome to a Broaderlenspodcast.
The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast. Samuel Chong, welcome to Broaderlands podcast. It's an honor to have you.
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thank you. Before we get started, and they don't call you a crazy Chinese American, how can you invite people that may not? How would you invite people to listen to us, just that may be skeptics?
I would just try to lead them into the topics of interest. For example, if I was going to Las Vegas and traveling to Arizona, on the way we would pass the Area 51, and then I would just mention that, do you believe in the ETs and the U.S. government secret products and things like that, and also for people who are more into their health in general, I would just focus more on the human energy field and its connection with the traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture, and just lead them into the way by saying that, oh, you know what, the ETs also told us about this as well, in addition to the ancient Chinese doctors. And there are also modern psychics who can see the colors of the auras. They're all connected. Things like that, just to lead them into the way.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I love your story. I love your insights. So it's an honor to have you on here. So I'm excited. Maybe to get started, you can share a little bit about who you are and what you do, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm Samuel Chong. I'm a certified court interpreter in Los Angeles. I work mostly with lawyers and doctors, also business people who need language help. I was born in Beijing, China, and I've been here for about 30 years or so. And professionally, I just help people out. But in my mind, I always want to learn the unknown, the paranormal, and the mysteries of the world. I think those are more interesting and fascinating and more important than making money.
Yeah, thank you. How'd you come across the book that we'll be talking about and Michelle's work?
I wanted to solve the mysteries of the world. And I believed that our ability to solve the mysteries of the world is very limited. I wanted to seek for help from the people or beings that have far more advanced knowledge and skills or information or technologies. Who would those be? Those would be the ETs, extraterrestrials, who have been visiting Earth for a long time. Because if they are able to visit us, they must have advanced knowledge and technologies. They would point us to the right direction in solving the mysteries of the world. They would be able to tell us who built the Great Pyramid of Egypt, for what purposes, what really happens in the Bermuda Triangle, and what's the meaning of life? What about the stories in the Bible? They would be able to solve all the questions that we have in mind, all the scientists struggling to answer. I think it's a shortcut. So in my mind, I was subconsciously looking for books written by ET contactees, books that make logic sense, but also have specific verifiable details.
Maybe we can get into Michelle Desmarquette's life, if you don't mind, and a little bit of who he is and what happened with his abduction. I'd love to you get in detail with that because it's a beautiful and powerful story.
Yes, he was a French Australian who was living in Cairns, Australia at that time, back in 1987, when the event took place. He was a landscaper, just having a regular life, raising plants and also some animals. In the middle of the night, sometime in July 1987, in the middle of the night, he suddenly woke up and he didn't know why he woke up. He didn't know why he walked to his kitchen where he took a note and a pen and wrote that he would be gone for 10 days and there's absolutely no need to worry about him. He didn't know why, but he walked outside of his house where he was lifted up, where he saw like his environment changed and where he encountered a very beautiful, gigantic, 9 or 10 foot tall, beautiful ET being wearing spacesuit who took him to a parallel universe where their spacecraft was stationed. And the ET had very angelic looking, told him that he would take a journey for about 10 days or so. And there they took on the journey, they took the trip to their planet, THIAOOUBA, and then he was told about a lot of the interesting things mentioned in the book, such as where we all came from, and why we live on Earth, why we moved to Earth, and what happened to the history, like throughout the history of Earth, like the ancient civilizations such as Atlantis, Lemuria, and also the stories in the Bible like Sodom and Gomorrah, what happened over there, and Exodus, how Moses led the ancient Hebrews out of Egypt, what happened when the sea was parted, and what were really the manas given to the Hebrews, and why they did that, and also the birth of Jesus and Christ, and all the things happen in modern times as well.
What other details you can give us? What else did he describe about, like the name, for an example, THIAOOUBA prophecy and the golden planet? Like, what's the meaning? Maybe you could share about the THIAOOUBANs and the people and who they are.
Yes, the THIAOOUBANs. We pronounce it THIAOOUBANs, but in French, if you really pronounce it, it's actually the Jehovahans. Very similar to Jehovah or Jehovahans, but there's really a connection over there because those people, according to Michel de Marquet, the author, were actually the Jehovahans as described in the Bible, but there's a distinction between God and Jehovah, and God is the creator of the universe, but Jehovah is actually the ET beings who came to visit us in the ancient past. And so the scripts actually wrote what happened in the past, and then the books were compiled into the Old Testaments of the Bible. And then so after Jesus came and they compiled into the New Testaments. So they were from the planet Jehovah or THIAOOUBA. Is a very beautiful planet. When Michel de Marquet was approaching the planet in the spacecraft, he saw a golden mist surrounding the planet. So this is why he called the planet the Golden Planet. After he landed on the planet, everything was so beautiful and colorful and bright. And he actually had to wear sunglasses, like masks, like sunglasses, to filter out the strong lights, the brightness of the color, in order for him to kind of adapt to the environment over there. So the planet is considered by us to be paradise or like a heaven-like planet. And Michel de Marquet enjoyed his time there. He didn't really want to come back because everything was so perfect, so comfortable and so relaxing, and he really didn't want to come back. After he came back, he was also looking forward to go back to the planet. So this tells you how enjoyable and his time was on the planet.
So, do you believe the Old Testament talks about ETs when it brings up like the Elohim? or Jehovah or Yahweh?
Yes, I do think so because but there's a distinction between Elohim, the God that created everything, and also versus Jehovah's, who were actually the angelic beings, the ETs who came and to help us and guide us from time to time. In the book THIAOOUBA Prophecy, it talks about the creation of the universe. So God is a pure spirit. It doesn't have any face. So being a pure spirit, he or it wanted to experience what we experience in life, to experience the challenges, the happiness, the sorrows in life. So he imagined everything. He imagined the stars, the planets, the animals, the plants, and also human beings in different planets. So once everything is ready, there's a big bang, like explosion, and then everything was created. And he created everything in 4 steps. So regarding how human beings were created, he actually created human beings using cosmic rays. So we were always wondering about who came first, chicken or egg. It's neither. It's the cosmic rays or cosmic egg that created everything. So we have our physical body. We also have our astral body. And we also have the chakras. So what happened was that when God created human beings, it actually had this kind of cosmic ray or cosmic egg splitting into 3 parts. And then the 3 parts split into 7 parts that became the chakras. And then the chakras evolved to become auras, so human energy fields. And then from the human energy fields, like the physical body was formed. So this is how humans or animals were formed, similarly like to animals or plants. So this is the start of the universe, or the planets, or how we were created. So we have different ETs on different planets according to this book, and so the ancient people didn't know about the visitations of the ETs, so they saw them as God. So that's actually the misconception. They were actually advanced ET beings that appear to be like angels or God to them. So this is the mix-up of concept. Yes, indeed, a lot of the things mentioned in the Old Testaments and New Testaments were true, but only to a certain extent, because in the later years, the Catholic Church Council meetings distorted the ancient scriptures of the Bible to fit for their purpose.
Yeah, you're right. 325 AD. When it started.
Yes. And this book, THIAOOUBA Prophecy, is very specific. It gives a lot of detailed accounts of what really happened during the birth of Jesus, and how King Herod killed so many babies. And they actually give a very specific number. 2,606 babies were killed by King Herod. And also a lot of other details like the Star of Bethlehem. There's actually the UFO, the ET craft, and how Jesus was born from Virgin Mary, and how he went to India, and how he died in Japan, how Christ came. Christ is a different being. How Christ was able to perform all the miracles, and after he began preaching, and the meaning of his resurrection was actually to show people at that time that there was life after death, and there was reincarnation. So this is his teaching just about love, about spirituality, about life after death. And unfortunately, the concept of reincarnation was removed by the church later.
Yeah, you're right. And could you help broaden our lens on that chapter in the book? Who was Christ?
Yes, according to the book, Jesus and Christ were 2 different beings. Christ was from them, was one of them. They made a body that appeared like Jesus, born from the Virgin Mary. And then they had someone from them, the planet THIAOOUBA, to come into the body made by them, the body of Jesus, so that Christ could perform all the miracles. The reason they did that was because people in the past, as well as people nowadays, they were highly skeptical. Unless someone who can perform miracles, they wouldn't believe the teachings of that person. So someone had to be like a omnipotent figure in order for the teachings or preachings to be believed. And they had to have one of their own to come into the body made by them. It's because, like, when a person reincarnates into the embryo implanted by them, or naturally conceived, the person would have to go through what the ancient Nagas call the river of oblivion, forgetting all the knowledge that they learned in the past, forgetting all the past lives, what happened in the past lives. So the young Jesus, born out of Virgin Mary, didn't have the knowledge to perform miracles. So this is why, like at least in the Bible that we read, there's no record of Jesus performing any miracles before he began preaching. And after he began preaching, when Christ saw the mother of Jesus, he didn't call her mother, he called her like woman. Very disrespectful term to call one's own mother. But it shows that it's a different figure. Jesus was born from the Virgin Mary, the one who couldn't perform miracles, one who went to India and died in Japan. So there's a tomb of Jesus in Shingo Village, Japan, that people can still visit. But Christ, on the other hand, is an omnipotent figure who was crucified on the cross and then resurrected 3 days after. And a lot of accounts written in the Bible, the New Testaments, were true. And I was able to verify and pinpoint the exact date of the birth of Jesus, and also the resurrection, and also the crucifixion of Christ, based on the astronomical records of China. Because China kept a very detailed record of what was happening in the sky. They actually documented the Star of Bethlehem, and based on the date, I was able to pinpoint the exact date of the birth of Jesus. If you want to know the date, I'll give it to you right now.
Sure.
Let me look at the record here. So it's actually the birth of Jesus was actually March 9th, 5 BC. And the crucifixion of Christ was actually on March 31st, AD 31. And the resurrection of Christ was actually on April 3rd, AD 31. Because the accounts, the descriptions in the Bible of what was happening in the sky matches the astronomical records of China.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because most scholars know that he was not born in Christmas time. I mean, it describes the environment totally different. I appreciate that. What does it talk about the lost years? Does it mention any about the lost years? Like some people talk about him going to India or Egypt or the Tibetan.
Yes, the book talks about how Jesus was seeking for certain knowledge and was led to India. And then he traveled to China along with his brother, who unfortunately died in China. And Jesus, the Jesus who couldn't perform miracles, kept a lock of his brother's hair with him to Japan. So when you do a search on the internet on the tomb of Jesus in Japan, you're able to see pictures of the tomb. And then the pictures also show there's another tomb next to the tomb of Jesus, which is a tomb of his brothers. And according to THIAOOUBA prophecy, the tomb of Jesus' brother buried lock of the hair that Jesus took with him. And he died in Japan and had 3 daughters. And if people visit Japan in that village, they're able to see that the customs of that village is very unique, very different from the nearby villages. And the villagers sing a song that actually sounded like the ancient Hebrew language. So it's a very interesting phenomenon that validates what the book THIAOOUBA Prophecy talks about.
That's interesting. My friend Suzanne Olsen, she passed away a few years back, but she wrote a book called Jesus in Kashmir, and she also did a documentary with the Indian government, and they have a tomb in Kashmir. It's called the Rosabelle Shrine. Have you heard of that?
Yes, I've heard about that, yes.
And they claim Jesus is in there. They believe the character that we call Jesus is there, and the Muslims have it captive, right? They took it over, and you can't really go there. But I wish we would be able to take some samples and really examine these tombs.
Yes, but I would suggest people to also look up the tomb of Jesus in Japan, because Japanese people, they are very specific on certain things, and they wouldn't just make things up. And they kept at the record straight too.
No problem. The Ethiopians, they were also able to perform these miracles, right?
Yes.
So, were you saying Jesus was a Ethiopian? You believe?
Yes, Christ, to be more precise, Christ was one of the Ethiopians. So Christ was able to perform all the miracles that's documented in the Bible. So are the Ethiopians. So when Michel de Marquet, the author, was taken to their planet, the Ethiopians actually showed him some of the miracles they're able to perform, like levitation, like materializing objects, and also projecting images to a person's mind, and also to communicate through telepathy. So they were able to perform all the miracles that performed by Christ. Actually, they set the record straight by saying that they were responsible for the destructions of Sodom and Gomorrah. They were responsible for leading Moses, helping the Hebrews out of Egypt. So they parted the sea of reeds, not the Red Sea, but the Sea of Reeds. And a lot of scholars agree that it's not the Red Sea that got parted, it's the Sea of Reeds. So this book, THIAOOUBA Prophecy, confirms that. So they dispatched, or they gave out manas to the Hebrews so that they could survive during the Exodus event. Manas were actually space food, very compactable, but yet very nutritious. But they rot every 24 hours or so. So they gave the food to the Hebrews, and the Hebrews wandered in the desert for about 4 years or so, not 40 years. So that's also a misconception that the Ethiopians corrected. They also corrected the fact that Moses was actually born out of an Egyptian family, not a Hebrew family. So a lot of scholars, some scholars also validated the fact that Moses is actually an Egyptian name, not a Hebrew name.
For sure.
Yeah. So this book kind of validates a lot of the new findings and new discoveries of the scholars nowadays. So I think this book is fascinating, but it's a league of its own.
Oh yeah, it's a must read. If anyone's into this stuff, I definitely I'm enjoying it. You said this difference between Jesus and Christ. Can you touch a little bit more on that?
Yes. So Jesus was a person who was born from the embryo implanted by the ETs into the uterus of Virgin Mary. And everything, like a lot of the things written in the Bible surrounding the birth of Jesus are true and really happened. So Virgin Mary was indeed a virgin. But Jesus, born out of Virgin Mary, couldn't perform miracles, even though he was highly spiritual, highly intelligent, having a very profound or in-depth conversation with the teachers of the temple. He couldn't perform miracles. So this is why we don't see any record of him performing miracles. And he went to India, died in Japan. But Christ, on the other hand, he was one of the Theubans, and he was able to perform all the miracles so that his teachings could be believed by the people at that time. But he had to use a lot of parables or analogies um, to the people at that time, because he was far more too advanced for the people. So it's just like us trying to teach or to tell like a caveman the dangers of atomic bombs. The caveman wouldn't be able to understand the radiation or some of the other dangers. We would have to use parables or analogies, saying that it's a big, like a lightning event or explosion. You have to go to a place as far as possible because it's highly dangerous, just like a fire or something like that. Similarly, Christ used a lot of parables, analogies, teaching the basic principles of life, the meaning of life, which is about love, spirituality, and compassion, and things like that.
Yeah, thank you. I wonder if the Buddha was a Theoban,
No,
because
the Buddha.
the Buddha performed these miracles as well. Most people don't talk about. And I was just talking to someone about that the other day, because walking on water, walking through walls, it's recorded with the Buddha as well.
Yes, Buddha was enlightened, but he, according to the THIAOOUBA prophecy, was a earthling. Actually, the book only mentions like a few earthlings, like the Buddha, like Napoleon, like Martin Luther King, like Gandhi. But the book, the Ethiopians, gives the highest praise to the Buddha, because Buddha received a final realization on his own, and he is an earthling, and he was able to become this kind of spiritual master through his own endeavor, and so this is why he was able to perform the miracles, and the Theubans kind of respected him greatly, by saying that the Buddha was a master on earth.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. It talks about Thoth and the Great Pyramid. Who built the Great Pyramids, in your opinion?
Thoth, he built the Great Pyramid of Egypt about 17,000 years ago. So Thoth was actually a very learned and wise person from Atlantis originally. So back then, Atlantis and Lemurian were still like continents in the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, um, and people had the knowledge and technology, like anti-gravitational technology and supersonic vibratory systems, to cut the huge stones in a very precise manner. So having this knowledge, so Thoth used his knowledge to build the Great Pyramid as a tool to capture the cosmic and terrestrial energy, so that the users of the Great Pyramid, like the ancient pharaohs, could concentrate the energy and project the energy into the space, so that they could communicate with people on different planets. They could also use the Great Pyramid as a tool to make rain, because they're able to ionize the energy, so that the clouds would form and the rain would fall. So the Great Pyramid was built as a tool for them to communicate to people from different planets, and also to make rain, according to the book THIAOOUBA Prophecy.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. And you brought up Lemuria. What other details did they give you about Lemuria? Who was the continent of Mu?
So Lemuria was a continent that existed on Earth a long time ago, until 14,500 years ago, when an earthquake occurred that sunk the entire continent into the ocean. So the Lemurians actually came from a different planet called Iruma 3 about 250,000 years ago. Back then, because they had an overpopulation issue, they wanted to migrate some of their people to Earth. So they found Earth and found Lemuria to be a continent that basically had no inhabitants except for a small group of Chinese people living on the northwestern corner of the continent. So even though they encountered a little bit of resistance from the Chinese, they decided to migrate their people face by face. So that's why they built ET bases on the far side of the moon as a transfer station, so that they could migrate their people and materials face by face. So they established a very, very successful civilization on Lemuria, where people didn't need to use money, and there was no monetary system on the continent back then. People just took whatever they needed from the marketplace without having to pay for it, because no one took advantage of each other, and people lived harmoniously. Michel Desmarquet was the author of the book, was able to witness how they lived on the planet, because he was taken to the past. He traveled back in time and personally experienced and witnessed how people lived in Lemuria. It's a very interesting description in the book. I strongly suggest people read it and to understand how he was able to travel back in time in his astral body, and how people lived in the past, and the music that they produced. A very fascinating description.
Yeah, thank you. It also describes the parallel universe on Earth and the Bermuda Triangle. It talks about. Maybe you can touch on that for us if you don't mind.
Yes, people say that planes or ships or people vanish in areas near the Bermuda Triangle. Yes, indeed, it's documented by a lot of great authors, and the book also explains like why that happens, because on Earth, on different locations, not just the Bermuda Triangle, there are warps or portals of or connecting points to a parallel universe. So when people, ships, or planes are near that location, the portals, they get sucked into the parallel universe where time stops. And it's not just the Bermuda Triangle. There are other places or locations on Earth in which the events happen. There's a great author called David Paulides. He was a private investigator who wrote a book, The Missing 411 series of books, that documented people who just gone vanish when they hike in the national parks in the U.S. Under strange circumstances. It's just like all out of a sudden they just disappear, and the dogs cannot smell the scent, like where they gone. So it's sometimes when the corpses are found, they appear to be in strange conditions, like they didn't seem to feel the pain because they walked to their bones. So the bones can be seen. It seems that they didn't feel pain. So this book, THIAOOUBA Prophecy, explains that in a parallel universe, time stops and people don't feel pain or hunger. This explains why the people like seem to walk to their bones and didn't feel any pain. So everything matches. The dots are connected to this book.
Yeah, I seen the I don't know, it was a documentary or a series of the missing 411, and it's very interesting because these cases are all over the country, different parts of the country. You're going to find these real cases of missing people. So it's very interesting.
Yes,
Yeah, thank
indeed.
you. Life on Mars, it also touches on that. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Yes, there were lives or human beings on Mars about 1.35 million years ago, when the blacks and the yellows were exploring a planet for them to migrate to. By the way, we all came from different planets. The blacks, the yellows, the Caucasians, the Polynesians, and the Hebrew, the Jewish people, they all came from different planets. So when the blacks and the yellows were exploring a planet to migrate to, they found Mars, but they found that Mars to be inhabited by people who um, were not very tall but highly spiritual people, but they didn't migrate to Mars because Mars was also a dying planet. The core of Mars was cooling down. So when the core of a planet cools down, it no longer has the electromagnetic force to capture the atmosphere. So without the atmosphere, there's no oxygen, so people would die. So they determined that Mars was not a suitable planet for them to migrate to. So they migrate their people to Earth. So the blacks migrated to or landed was now today's Australia, and the yellows, the Chinese, migrated to was now today's Myanmar, southern Myanmar. And according to Michel Desmarquet, Mars died, the planet died, and some other people moved to Tibet. So Tibetans are highly spiritual people nowadays, even though the Chinese people, they wanted to kind of brainwash them to kind of want them to be more kind of capitalistic to earn more money. But the Tibetans wanted to keep their own culture or religion, and even the Chinese cannot persuade the Tibetans to be more materialistic. You can see that how strongly their spirituality was engraved into their lives. So this is kind of like another fact that matches what Michel Desmarquet was telling us.
Yeah, thank you. Do you think the original Lemurians were Polynesian?
Yes, I do, and the book talks about that. That the ancestors of the Polynesians were Lemurians that came from the planet X3. Yeah,
it's interesting. What would the THIAOOUBA people call a god?
they would call God the Great Spirit, the Great Ether, the creator of the universe, because they created everything, including them, the ETs. Even though they're highly advanced ETs, they're also created by God. So we are all brothers and sisters. We are all the creations of the common creator. Even though the ETs from THIAOOUBA, they live on category 9 planet, and we live on category 1 planet, the lowest category. We all came from the same creator.
Yeah, I love that. And can you touch on the difference between a category 9 versus a category 1, if you don't mind?
Yes, the number 9 is a magic number in the universe. So when the creator created everything, they categorized the different planets into 9 different categories. Category 1 is the lowest category, and people who live on category 1 planet are like elementary school students learning the basics. And then once we are ready spiritually, once we are evolved sufficiently, we can move up the ladder and to live on category 2 planet. And so we can move up to until the category 9 planet, in which people on a category 9 planet, they're highly evolved and spiritually and materialistically and physically as well. They don't age, they don't die, they're forever looking like in their 30s. They can levitate, they can materialize objects, they can kind of do everything that they want, and they can join and rejoin the great ether like God, and then the cycle continues. So this is how the categories are made, and the differences are kind of very large.
Yeah, thank you. I want to ask you 2 different questions at one time, but I'll start with the universal law. Can you break down the universal law versus human law?
Yes, there are several universal laws mentioned in the book. One universal law is the law of karma. Like once we act, there's a reaction, there's a consequence to our actions. The consequences if they don't come in this lifetime, they'll come in the next lifetime. So there's the law of karma. There is also the law of what we should do in our lifetime, which is to grow spiritually, to focus on spiritual development. And that's the law of the universe. When it says that human beings, no matter where they live on, their main reason or their main goal is to develop their spirituality. So we go through the different challenges in our lifetime just to learn the spiritual lessons, to improve our spirituality. That's a universal law that this book emphasizes on.
So that's the purpose of reincarnation, to continue to expand and grow.
Yes, to expand and to continue to learn, and we learn spiritual lessons through different like life events. For example, if a person lost her husband, then she would feel very sorrowful and remorseful. Like that's actually a spiritual lesson for her to learn. That there is life after death and there is reincarnation. Learn how to be more independent of her own life, and despite the sorrows that she feels, she would need to be more optimistic and to be compassionate, and life goes on. So this is a spiritual lesson that she would learn in her lifetime. There are different spiritual lessons that a person would learn in the person's lifetime. So we have different lessons to learn. Even the super wealthy, like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and George Soros, they all have their spiritual lessons to learn. Being the wealthy people like they are, and they have to resist the temptations, and yeah, sometimes they fail, and most of the times they fail.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Doesn't it mention the current state of affairs that we're going through right now? Kind of prophesized.
Yes. This book is actually a book of warning. It's not a book of prophecy, because it warns us that if we don't change how we live, we are going to be heading a catastrophe. So it talks about the real dangers on Earth. Number 1 being money. Number 2, politicians. Number 3, journalists and drugs. Number 4, religions. So as we all know, like everything revolves around money. The big pharmaceutical companies, they want to profit from different means, using different means. The petrochemical companies, the energy companies, they want to profit from gasolines or oil. Even the education system, like the textbooks, a lot of students complain the textbooks are so expensive. Why? They need to profit from those. Even though the different versions are very similar to each other, you need to buy the latest edition. And and they kind of indoctrinate us into a system of belief, a belief system. And we need to break from the system. We need to get out of the box and to see what is really going on in the world. So we need to have independent thoughts. We need to see behind the scenes. Like here in the U.S., we see Republicans fighting against Democrats, especially if it's an election year coming up. And people need to realize that there's a group of people pulling the strings behind the scenes. So it doesn't really matter if it's a Republican or Democrat. We need to know that what's really going on. Like if you read the book, The Committee of 300 by Dr. John Coleman, you're going to know that there's a group of people that influence both the Republicans and the Democrats, and also they influence the decisions of the lawmakers, and also like according to that book, almost all the secretaries of states were decided by them, and about 50% of presidents of the U.S. were decided by them. So it shows that the real decision makers are not the politicians on the front stage. They're the puppets, and there are people who pull the strings of the puppets that ran the show.
Kind of like the Wizard of Oz, that little guy behind the curtains.
Yes.
No, I appreciate that because both parties are being played by the same corporate elites. Are these elites? They often hear about elites. These elites working with other beings, other ETs. Is that true? Do you believe?
Well, I personally think that this group of people, for example, the Illuminati, they have strong psychic powers. I actually translated another book called 334 Lies, LIES, written by the former highest degree chair of the Illuminati. And it talks about how he was led into the group, how he developed his psychic abilities, how he was able to use the ancient form of astrology to predict future events, and also to influence people's mind, like mind control. So they have psychic abilities and psychic powers. So some people believe that they are the ETs influencing the politicians, but they are kind of the practitioners of ancient knowledge. They're just like Christ or kind of Qigong masters, being able to perform miracles in any way that they want to. So I don't think it's the ETs that kind of influenced this kind of group of financiers. I think it's the secret societies, members of the secret societies that influence them. But on the other hand, our friendly ETs also intervene from time to time. For example, they prevented Germany during World War II from being the first country to develop the atomic bomb. So they were kind of helping us, helping the US government at that time to end the war earlier, to have less casualties. Because they believed that the U.S. government at that time was more sincere in ensuring individual liberties at that time, yes. So they intervene from time to time, but in a positive way. But I do encourage people to listen to or watch the interviews of Ronald Bernard, a former Dutch banker that used to work for members of the Illuminati, and also read the book 334 Lies that talks about the rituals of the Illuminati, how they do certain things, how they influence the politicians and worldly affairs. And but that book is a very disturbing book with graphic descriptions, but it reveals a lot of secrets.
What language was that originally written in?
It was originally written in German language, and I translated it into English about 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, you're awesome! Thank you for that. We really mean that. What does the book talk about about the paranormal and what happens to us when we die? Our soul, like what is the soul? And I heard you talk about um, it's pieces of our astral body when we die that are left here. Maybe you can touch on that.
Yeah, ghosts. Yeah, so a lot of people wonder about ghosts or spirits in nature. Yes, there are ghosts, and some people can see ghosts, like they're psychics, and also Mac Burry, someone who lives in Pasadena in California, who can see ghosts and communicate with ghosts. There are people like that. Ghosts are actually like electrons, made of electrons from our astral body. So when we die, our astral body, made of electrons, leaves the physical body. And then in 3 days' time, 81% of the electrons of the astral body goes to our higher self, which is another kind of body made of electrons, bringing all the memories and information and spiritual lessons that the person learned in his or her lifetime. So what about the other 19% remaining electrons of the astral body? So those electrons remain in nature until they're either recycled by nature or when a person reincarnates. So what people see ghosts are the 19% of the remaining electrons of the astral body of the person who passed away. Because of the static forces, the electrons resemble into a shape that that appear to be what the person looked like when the person was alive. And also because electrons contain memories, so ghosts also have memories as well. So this is why they frequently haunt the places that they loved or hated. So I find that to be very logical and very, very intuitive, especially the fact that 81% of electrons goes to the higher self after 3 days. So remember, Christ resurrected after 3 days. So there's a reason for that. And also in Tibetan culture, after a person passes away, the corpse of that person is not to be touched for 3 days. So I find this book, THIAOOUBA Prophecy, very interesting, like connecting all the dots and giving very reasonable and plausible explanation to the paranormal events that happen on Earth.
Yeah, thank you. Michelle Desmarquette's no longer with us in form, right?
Right.
Did you get to communicate with him beforehand? Maybe you could share how you met him and maybe your last time seeing him.
Yes, I visited him twice. The first time was in 2016, and the second time was in 2018, just 3 months before he passed away.
Wow.
The reason for me finding him, tracking him down, was that I was extremely fascinated by the content of the book. In the postscript of the book, it says there are far more incredible things that the author Michel de Marquet was not allowed to write in the book because they're too incredible and we were far from understanding them. I was very curious about that one thing he was told not to write in the book. So I was determined to find him and to ask him in person. So I tracked him down and found that some tourists met him in Vietnam, where he was residing in his later part of his life, his later years of his life. But they didn't reveal his exact address. So I took a picture. I downloaded the picture that showed his bungalow, his house in Vietnam, and I print that picture out, and I flew to that city in Vietnam and showed that picture to the taxi driver, asking the taxi driver to take me to that bungalow, that house. And the taxi driver, after like 2 tries, found that place, and I asked him if Michel de Marquet lived there, and I got a confirmation answer. He was having an afternoon nap, so I waited until he woke up and met him in person. So that's the first time I met him, and but he didn't tell me anything that was not written in the book. The first time I met him, he asked me to get a book published in China and Taiwan or Chinese-speaking country, and I did. And then I got an email from him saying that he was given the instruction to tell me that one thing he didn't write in the book, but he had to tell me in person. So that's the reason I flew to Vietnam the second time in 2018, when he told me that one thing personally.
Are you able to share that?
Yeah, to a certain extent. He told me that Tao, the ET, told him not to tell me not to tell anyone else. So I had to follow the instruction. But they didn't tell me not to reveal as many clues as possible or giving as many hints as possible. So that's what I did. I wrote an article and I gave many clues as possible. So the reader, the careful reader, if the reader read between the lines, the reader will be able to understand what it is about generally.
And what is it about, and where can we find this article?
So the article is titled "The Second Coming of Christ." And it tells you some basic information, like what I can find and what the clues that I can give. It makes a lot of reference to the New Testaments of the Bible, and I can send you the link of the article if you're interested. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Because I know Yogananda wrote a couple big books on the second coming of Christ, but he says it's the Christ within you. They talked about, a lot of the mystics talk about Christ as a level of consciousness. What would you have to say with that?
Yes, indeed. The kingdom of God is within you is one of the most important verses in the Bible. The Christ, you have the Christ consciousness, because we are all created by the same creator, the God, or God. And when God created every one of us, it inserted a tiny portion itself into each of our astral bodies. So we are part of God, and God is part of us. On the other hand, we also have to realize that a lot of the events documented in the Bible are true, that really happened historically. So Jesus was a real figure, a real human being, and Christ is a real being too. And Moses really led the Hebrews out of Egypt, away from the evil rules of the ancient pharaohs of Egypt. And those events actually happened. And Jesus actually came the first time in the past, or Christ actually came. And by the meaning of my article, it talks about the second coming of Christ or Jesus, which indicates that it's not referring to the consciousness that we all have. It's not about the small tiny portion of God that we all have in our astral body. It talks about something else. So Yogananda is right, but also Jesus and Christ are two real figures too.
And how do you separate them and put them together, Jesus and Christ?
Well, people didn't know how to put them together, so this is why they had a lot of debates during the Catholic Church Council meetings, whether the God, Spirit, Spirit, God, and Jesus, like Father, Son, and the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, is united. Actually, what I would say is that Jesus is a person who was born out of Virgin Mary, who couldn't perform miracles. He was born that way just to show people that someone extraordinary was going to be born that way, just to catch people's attention and to fulfill the prophecy. He died in Japan. Christ, on the other hand, is this being that preached about spirituality and love. And in order for people to be convinced and believed of his preachings, he performed miracles. So this is Jesus and Christ. It's the Christ who died on the cross, who resurrected 3 days after, who taught about the spirituality and love and reincarnation. But we also need to follow the teachings of Christ to be more spiritual. It doesn't mean that we need to follow a specific organized religion. We should follow the teachings of spiritual masters.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I could find the same teachings in the Buddha or Krishna. I mean, Krishna was another one that was pretty awesome character, and so on. Many of the masters seemed like they tapped into that universal consciousness.
Yes.
Living more in the heart, centered. I love all that. I love that universal consciousness. So thank you for sharing. I really appreciate you coming on. What did they say about religion, organized religion, the THIAOOUBANs?
So it's actually the number 4 danger on earth. It's actually a curse to the people on earth. So religious leaders always try to, a lot of them try to gain fame and power, they distort the original meanings of the ancient scriptures. And actually, for example, the Christian religion, if you read the book THIAOOUBA Prophecy, it specifically named the 4 Catholic Church Council meetings that intentionally distorted the original meanings of the ancient scriptures. The Council of Nicaea is one of the 4. There are 3 others. So not just a Christian religion, other religions too, like the Buddhism too. Like, Buddha in the past didn't really want people to worship him. So this is why he didn't allow anyone to draw a picture of him or make a sculpture of him. But nowadays in China, people who believe in so-called Buddha, they worship the Buddha sculptures or statues, and they give money to the Buddha, they give money to the monks. So everything gets distorted.
Yeah.
So they need to believe on their own in their heart.
Have the THIAOOUBA people tried to contact you?
No, they have not. I wanted to get most out of my life in this lifetime by navigating the system on my own, and to do the best I can to spread the messages so that more people can wake up. I'm not asking for their help unless they have to intervene or something. Like, just like a parent trying to teach a basic principle of a mathematical problem to his son. I mean, the more effective way of learning is to tell his son the basic principles, so that the son can learn on his own, and not by giving the meal on the plate, or like giving the answers to the son directly, because that way the son will never learn, and he would have to repeat the lessons, repeat the entire process, the learning process. So I really want to navigate the system on my own and do my best without their help, unless they have to.
Yeah, thank you. I know Thich Nhat Hanh, the famous Zen master who passed away a few years back. To me, he was like a living Buddha, a living Christ on earth in modern times. But he talked about the second Buddha should be a collective awakening. One Buddha is not enough. Would you call that the second coming of Christ, a collective awakening?
Well, in a sense, he may be right, because that's the ultimate goal, is to really have the collective awakening happening in the world. But what Michel Desmarquet told me is not this kind of collective awakening. It's more towards like a real event. I would suggest people to read the book and also my article to get more understanding, because without a foundation of knowledge, it's a little bit difficult to understand.
No, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you coming on. Do you have any last words?
We all have difficulties or challenges in this life. I think those are valuable lessons. When you have such challenges, when you are feeling so desperate, I think the right thing to do is to look inside for answers. The kingdom of God is within you. Through meditation, through prayers, or just have a good night of sleep, you're able to connect yourself with your higher self. If the solutions are good for your spiritual development, they will be given to you, one form or another, like either through dreams or through kind of gut feelings or intuition. So always trust your heart, trust yourself, and look inside when you have challenges in your lifetime. Not to follow a specific religious leader, and definitely not a politician, and not the mainstream media.
Really appreciate that. How can we find you? Maybe you could share your website and your links if you don't mind.
Yeah, I can send the links to you later, but my website is chinasona.org, CHINASONA.org. And people can find the book on Amazon, THIAOOUBA Prophecy, just type the title. It's also on Audible. So if you want to listen to the book, you can find it on Audible. It's read by a British person, more with a very sophisticated accent.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to end it with Michel Marquette's, some of his last words in the book. And he says, no religion, no belief, and no book, not even this one, will affect the truth and the order established by him in the universe. Rivers will always flow from their source towards the ocean, even if a religion, a sect, or billions of people want to believe the opposite. Samuel Chong, thanks for coming on. I think you need to listen to that song by Cypress Hill, Rock Superstar, because that you are. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a play. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on a day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.